for reading from mentor. And then after that, we will have small introduction to the literature review by Ajahn David and for reading from mentor. And then after that, we will have small introduction to the literature review by Ajahn David and for reading from mentor. And then after that, we will have small introduction to the literature review by Ajahn David and for reading from mentor. And then after that, we will have small introduction to the literature review by Ajahn David and for reading from mentor. And then after that, we will have small introduction to the literature review by Ajahn David and for reading from mentor. And then okay, sorry, I hear my voice. Okay, so first, let me explain about our schedule today. All right. So here is our activities today. So we start with the presentations. So each group has 10 minutes for the presentation and 5 minutes for Q&A and also comments from mentors. And the sequence of this presentation will be followed according to the table, education, 2 groups, and the second is the work experience of health volunteers, and then local knowledge and local economy, migrant workers, and state power and policy. And then after our presentation from your homework, we will have 10 minutes break. And after the break, we will continue with the small introduction to literature review by Ajahn David and introduction to research design and methodologies from me. Okay, so if the first group ready, please.
Good morning, everyone. So my group is about under the theme of the COVID-19 and the migrant educations. We have 2 groups. So today maybe only one group will present about the migrant education. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
So basically our group, this is the content of literature review, which is and this is just my personal opinion, and our group have not been like sitting the meeting together yet. Our first meeting will be on 13 May, so I think we will have more information on that day. So I will present just my my personal literature review that I have prepared for. So in the literature review, at the very beginning of the literature review, it's gonna be the COVID-19. So we explain the background information of the COVID-19. What is COVID-19? And then follow up with the migration to Thailand, the business background information of the migration, and then narrow down to the focus group on the Shan migrant children in the Chiang Mai and for formal education. And the third one is the Thailand education policy, and then follow up with the socio-economic impact of the COVID-19 on the Shan migrant children. So it will be education challenges, the mental health issue, the protection and safety issue, the financial insecurity, and the response from the NGO, the government. So first of all, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we will have a COVID-19 background formation. And then we will have, in the following next section, we are going to explain the migration to Thailand. And then when we study the migration, we push and pull factor theory, push and pull factor theory seem to be like had to be described in the international migration in Thailand, and also international migration in Thailand can be classified into main purpose. The first one is the employment purpose, and the second one is the unstable political issue. So according to our research main focus group, which we focus on the Shan ethnic minority. So they have migrated to Thailand, especially in Chiang Mai. We can see that the Shan ethnic minority are the majority who are living in Chiang Mai. So based on the push and pull factor theory, so Chiang Mai is at our center. If you look at the geographically, we can see like Shan State and the northern Thailand are very close, and then Chiang Mai also have a good economic city, and then became the main destinations for the Shan migrant people to seek for the job opportunity. Yeah, and then when they migrate to Chiang Mai, and then they not migrate alone. They also bring their family and their children. Also, follow the next section, the Thailand education policy. So regarding to the Thailand education policy, which has instituted in 2005. So since 2005, the Ministry of Education has implemented the regulations and that direct the school to enroll all the students regardless of their identifications, race, and gender, and so on, and also including the illegal migrant children. So after the announcement of this policy, some migrant children are lucky to have formal educations, and then they can also go to the state school, state government school, state public school, which is very different from the informal school, micro learning center. So, but not every family of the migrant people are able to send their children to the school, because most of the migrant workers, their family live in the remote area, and then construction site, which is very far from the school, and then they cannot send their children, and then their children education will be more limited. So this section gonna be the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 on Asian migrant children. So in the literature review, we put the migrant children. Every see migrant children are facing many challenges, and they are really being vulnerable by the socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19, such as poverty, survival and health, and the learning and safety. And also, like, there's a link between the children access to education and the family conditions. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the migrant children are the most vulnerable population if we compare to other groups. And it also have a significant impact on the well-being of the people and nations worldwide, with the major public health, economic, social, and safety implications. And also the ability to cope with economic, social, and psychological impact of the pandemic can be affected by a variety of factors, including their living and working conditions, and also lack of the considerations of their cultural and the linguistic diversity. And also, like, the protections and safety of the migrant educations, like, is this down as like their income are lost, such as they're facing economic downturn and the financial burden. So they are also facing additional psychological harm, such as like there being marginalizations, and then also there being stigma from the host community. And then so due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so migrant children may also have like excluded from the public health care centers, and also lack of financial support, which means like they are limited access to the healthcare and the social benefit. So the increases of the financial burden, emotional distress, which linked to the family job and the school closures, have put migrant students at risk of the losing opportunity of learning. These are the impact, on the migrant people. These are the reference that I selected, but we will have the article on the document that assigned by our mentor. We will review it together on our first meeting on 13 May, so that we can bring more idea and information. Thank you.
Thank you, Nonunua.
Yes.
Okay, and education team. So any comments or question? Can I ask one question?
Yes.
So you review the push and pull theory for the reason of the migration of Chan people from Myanmar to Thailand.
Yeah.
And I would like to know that how will you apply this idea to explain or to link with the education of the children?
Because the reason why I have to put the push and pull factor to explain why they have to move to Thailand. As I mentioned in the literature review, they, because of the employment, the employment, how to say, they want to seek a better job in Chiang Mai, and also which another factor we can see civil war and the unstable political issue in Myanmar. So they have to move to Chiang Mai, and also even they move to Chiang Mai, they're not only one. They have to bring their whole family, including their children and themselves. So their children also have to like go to the school. They also need education. So we can like, how to say, connect the educations of the migrant children to this push and pull factor.
Okay. I think you can also look at some literatures that explain the education, like the risks of the children from learning process during COVID-19 or something that maybe help you to understand the situation of education during this pandemic. Other mentors?
Can I ask you some questions? You
Yes.
mentioned about the migrant children, migrant worker children. When you mention about migrant children, they are legal or illegal migrant workers?
Maybe like according to the article that I read, they are also both legal migrant children and illegal migrant children.
Yes,
Yeah.
and on your research, you would like to focus on illegal or legal?
I think both.
You have only 1 or 2 months for this work.
I think I also have not much idea about the strong migrant children in Chiang Mai because I don't know about that really much. I just heard from the suggestion from our mentor, and then yeah, I think I can search more information about the Australian migrant children.
And recently, I met some migrants, Robert, and he lived in Chiang Mai for a long time, over 10 years ago. And now he becomes a foreman and he have more money. So I think that when you mention migrant workers or migrant children, we have to look in detail because some they are poor, they are not permission, they are illegal, but some they become rich more. I cannot say that they are rich, but they may have more money and they may have a different status, economic status from the other Chan migrant workers. I think that you should focus in who you want to study.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Ajahn, may I say something? I would like to suggest that when you do a literature review, you should focus on existing literature that would help you or guide you in your data collection. And it should be quite, for this particular purpose, it should be a bit narrow in terms of scope. I don't think you need to do a little review on what is COVID-19. If you do so, it would take you a lot of works to cover all the definition and meanings of COVID-19. And even migration, maybe it's also there have been many study about migration from Myanmar to Thailand. Maybe you don't have to review the literature on this issue of migration, but should focus upon education of the migrant children, and try to look for some literature on this issue that discuss about the role of family, the role of learning center, I mean school, and also the perception of the parents toward education of their children. I do not know. I'm not familiar with all of the literature, but perhaps you should collect these references and classify them into different groups, and then you tell us what has been done, what has been discovered by those literature, and what is the gaps that you would like to do your research in order to fill the gap, or what are the lessons learned from those literature that you would like to use it for your further research. Please be narrow. You are not going to write. Literature review is not the start, not the whole research project yet, but it's only part of this, your work. And if it is going to be within 2 months, then you don't have much time to cover everything. So please be narrow. Please narrow it down to focus upon the key the key studies that you have found from works which has been done in relation to migrant education. And if possible, you may want to look for some example in other countries. There are also education of the migrant children in, for example, in the US, and also maybe in Syria, for example. So you otherwise it will be too narrow, right? Too narrow only Burma and Thailand. But I think you can benefit from a comparative perspective as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn.
I will ask a colleague of mine who did his dissertation on migrant education in the US. He will come to see me this afternoon. I'll get reference from you.
Any other comments?
Can I add something? Can you hear me? Sorry.
อาจารย์พิสิทธิ์
ครับ Okay ครับ Thank you for all the comments from the mentors นะครับ Minunu, I hope you understand more about your topic, and I understand you because this is first of all, it's a good start because I think Nunu have worked on her own because he haven't got a chance to talk to discuss more with her group members as a whole because the meeting will be on this Sunday, right? Yeah, the first meeting is on this Sunday, this coming Sunday. So yeah, thank you so much for your hard work and for all the comments is so are very useful for you to talk to your friends, to your group members to make it more specific, more narrow, more focused. Yeah, I think we got a lot and we could talk later about this on this Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So another subgroup of education is not here, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we will continue to the second group. The second group work. Oh, okay.
Is our group agenda. I will share. Okay. So before I present, let me say that as two of my members are not here, so I'm sorry if I cannot cover all of their parts here. Yeah. So for our literature, our group is about the COVID health volunteer in the community. So we would like to start with the role of the COVID volunteer in the community level, like how they we would like to talk about how the beginning of the Thailand initiating the program of primary healthcare center healthcare system. How we will get some information from some literatures about that one. After that, we would like to know more about how they changed their role after when the COVID came, because COVID has some of them lose their job and some of them have to and also in addressing the COVID, they have to give more time in their volunteer work. So we would like to write about how they adapt and adjust their time and their financial problem when during the COVID pandemic, how they shift their role from the previous and the current one. After that, we would like to examine more about the importance role of the healthcare volunteer in their community, because they play a key role in their community while trying to prevent during the prevent process or monitoring process. So they are at the group that at the high risk infecting from the COVID. So we will examine more about their feeling, the stigma that they against the healthcare volunteer and the COVID patients. Yeah. So in here there are some literature that mention about the definition of the stigma by the different order or yes. And also in here there are also some we will also add some example the previous epidemic like polio or HIV or SARS. From those epidemic, how can they approach gaining that, learning the example from those epidemic, how they address the problem of the stigma. So from learning from those literatures, we can know how at the community level, the healthcare volunteer are managing and facilitating their community to avoid those problems. Yes. Yeah, this is all of our literature here, but we will have more when we write it and actually, but we haven't started writing yet.
Okay. Thank you, Timothy and the health volunteer group. Any comments?
Hi, I just want to ask, have you read these papers? And would you share your perspective on any papers? I think that would be good, help you to structure your literature review rather than just give a very general.
Yeah, I'm just not scanning by skimming some of those. Yeah. So in here, for this one, HIV informed as approach to COVID-19 stigma. In that literature, it explained about how HIV epidemic has like the effect or stigma in the affecting stigma stimulate the stigma among the people, among the population based on sex or race or regional. So again, from that example, COVID-19 also have many unsolved problems currently, because most of the government level or state level only focus on in prevention or like to stop the transmission, but not much focus on the stigma problem. So that paper suggests we should also focus on addressing those stigma problem, not only focusing to stop the transmission or something like that. Yeah, by the getting example from the previous epidemic.
Okay, thank you.
I have one suggestion. In one article that I found, the other themselves are the health volunteer, and they wrote this as also researcher and volunteer. So they use their story to explain and narrate the story. Very interesting. And these strategies is called action strategies. So they recognize themselves as also the knowledge producer. So it's very interesting to, if you can study, because you mentioned that you want to study also in the emotional aspect of the health volunteer. I think you can use their voice or their own experience to, how to say, to get the more details from that. And the key point here is the knowledge production that I think is very valuable to study in for your research.
Thank you.
Excuse me, can I ask you something?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just out of my curiosity. I'm not sure that I can, get all the things that you said, but my question is, your group would like to investigate the role of health volunteer during the COVID-19 outbreak, right?
Yes.
I'm wondering what aspect that you want to investigate. For example, the role that they deal with or help the people, or the role that, or the way that they heal themselves. Because they help everybody, and everybody gets stressed, get problems. So in the psychological things, and the role that they help people, or the role that they heal themselves.
Yeah, that is one thing that we are not clear enough yet. Yeah, we would like to, we have to clarify that one. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My comment maybe continue from Ajahn Pisit. I think that for the volunteer, they don't work alone. They are the partner, or they help. Nowadays, have a question, the health volunteer, they work with the health personnel as a partner, or just the workers who help the health personnel. The two words, it's not the same. So I would like to know that how a health volunteer work with the health personnel or work with the medical doctor or nursing. How do they work together for prevention or for reduce stigma, as you mentioned?
Yes, that is the part that my friends read, but in some literature, it says that since the beginning outbreak of the COVID-19, the healthcare volunteer, they got training from the government, like to adapt the policies or like prevention process. After that, they manage in their own community. Some village, we found that they are quite successful, very well managed. Yeah. So they also get some like compensation of not salary that much, only a few, many like thousands per month, 1,000 per month. So we will also examine, does it effective enough from the government support? Only a few days workshops can they apply all the knowledge to prevent themselves and to manage their community?
I would like to add one more comment. If you still remember our lecture at the beginning of our workshop about the gender intersecting identities, that the speaker also explained about the role of the women during the COVID-19 and how
Yes.
women become vulnerable during that, and how they empower themselves during that time. I think that can be useful for your study to apply to understand the intersecting identities of health volunteers, which I think are more women than men, how they encounter with the problems of stigma during this COVID-19 from the families, from friends, from communities as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more comments? So thank you. Thank you very much, Timothée. We will come back to before we go to the third group, we will come back to the educational subgroup. Yeah. They record the video. Can you hear the sound?
No.
I think there is some at bottom, something like share with sounds. I'm not sure for Zoom. Can you find it? Share with sound, original sound, something like that.
Wait for a moment. We try to open the video.
So yes, my name is Po, and our group is working on COVID-19 and education. And we choose to work on the migrant education issue in Dak province. So our topic is migrant children's education in Dak province and the COVID-19. So yes, my name is Po, and our group is working on COVID-19 and education. And we choose to work on the migrant education issue in Dak province. So our topic is migrant children's education in Dak province and the COVID-19. So last week we couldn't come up with the questions, but yes, we got the two research questions. The first one is, how did COVID-19 affect the migrant children education? And the second one is what are these challenges and possible learning methods for migrant children to accept quality education during COVID-19, and the role of stakeholders like local organization, government institution, especially Ministry of Education in both Burma and Thailand. So in order to talk about the migrant children's educations, so we have to talk about how migrant children get into Thailand. So since 1962, millions of Myanmar children and family have to flee to Thailand or China because of the economic hardship, oppression, persecution, the vast minority by the military dictatorships. So according to ILO survey in 2014, it stated that around 200,000 to 400,000 migrant children live all over Thailand. So how migrant learning centers are operating? So according is for the Thai Ministry of Education, they clarify that they have to provide basic education of quality and free of charge, and it should include children who was lack of Thai national or civil registration. So that means it should include migrant children too. So, but the problem is that there are a lot of problems in providing the quality and free of charge education. So there's alternative education options exist for migrants exist in the form of migrant learning center. So these are an official school and mostly set up by a member of the migrant community to make it easier for the student to enter and for the teaching to be suitable for the children in terms of language and culture backgrounds. So for the migrant learning center, so you can see at the top is the migrant learning center. So for the migrant learning center these days, they offer matriculation class, which is the class for high school. It's kind of like the high school classes where you learn the high school subjects in migrant learning center, but you go back to Burma to take the exam. So if you pass the exam, that means you pass the high school exam you finished you finish high school in Burma, but it's very difficult because only about around 35% of children graduated, finish or pass the matriculation test. So under Micro Learning Center, there's also before COVID-19, the systems they offer Thai non-formal educations curriculum, Myanmar non-formal education curriculum, and also Micro Learning Center curriculum too. So when we talk about the Micro Learning Center, they are stakeholders. So Micro Learning Centers, migrant community, local organizations, non-governmental organizations, international organization, and of course Thai and Myanmar Ministry of Education in order to so these are the stakeholders that help the Micro Learning Center to operate. So for the education policy of Thai Ministry of Education for migrant children, so based on the Compulsory Education Act of 2003, it's a Thai is the Thai law, and it is a Compulsory Education Act of 2013, and it makes education compulsory for all children between the age of 7 and 15 to attend school. And for the Ministry of Education in Thailand, they provide financial support to every student on a per head basis. So they provide tuition fee, book fee, stationery fee, uniform fee, and other extracurricular activity fees. And also, as I mentioned, even though migrant children have access to public educations, the Thai government doesn't have a policy to promote or pursue migrant parents to take their children to school. And there's no policy to follow up on migrant children who drop out of school. And the other problem is the language barrier too. So for most of the migrant children, they don't speak Thai. So there's no way that they can join the Thai Thai school, because they have to, they are kind of using the non-formal education systems. So they don't so before they cannot go to Thai school because there was no Thai non-formal education, so they couldn't go to school. But now they changed the policy. They provide options for the student to choose whether they want to study Migrant Learning Center curriculum or Myanmar non-formal education curriculum or Thai non-formal education. So these days it's a little bit better. So if for children who choose to study Thai non-formal education curriculum, they can continue their education after primary school. So they can join the Thai middle school or high school, or based on the level of their language. So before, these are the problems that happened before. So I think this reading is about in 2000. Sorry, yeah. This literature is written in 2013, 14, 15, I guess. So this was still happening at that time. So as a result, the majority of migrant children in Thailand, they choose to study in Migrant Learning Center rather than the Thai government school. So what's happening in Migrant Learning Center due to COVID-19? So when the COVID-19 started, the Ministry of Education in Thailand, they asked the school to close down. So that's have very negative effect on the migrant learner center, because for the migrant learner center, the parents are poor. They cannot provide. They have to work very hard, like to get the income. Right? So some family members, they don't have enough kind of a device, or they don't have internet access, or even if they have it, like it's very limited. So it's very difficult for the migrant children to continue their education. So what they have to do is they have to do like a homeschool. Okay, so the migrant teachers, they schedule like a homeschool for each based on the students. So like for example, like one student might have a chance to study like once a week based on the schedule of the teacher. And also the negative impact of COVID-19, according to Jati, is that like before the COVID-19, the migrant teacher will go back to Burma, but because of COVID-19 situations, they are not allowed to travel back. So again, like they don't have enough. Migrant learning center doesn't have enough teacher to do the home-based learning. So that's the negative impact. And also one of the indirect impact is the public health issue. So like it is estimated that only 10% of migrants are legally registered in Thailand. So for those who are not legally registered, they would like, it's very hard for them to get Thai health services, like public health services. So as a result, like children of migrant workers are rarely receive immunizations, or like even there's no plan for them to receive immunizations. So yeah, these are all the literature. These are the literature that we collected so far, and we will also do more reading, and we will also start working on the data collection. Thank you.
Okay, so this is video from education team. So any member of this team here? No.
That's only one Thai from CMU student. Yeah.
Okay, so Visit, do you want to add up anything?
Oh, I met them all on last Sunday talking about this, and I gave them the documents and did some literature review, and some appear on his presentation. But I think he has worked on his own, because from the Japanese student from the Japan side, they will work on the policy, the international policy, and hasn't come up with the literature review, the presentation is not in the presentation. So this is on his own work. So if the other members have comments or suggestion, I will collect and give them in the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ka. Any comments, questions?
I have a question to Ajahn Pisit. So about the target group of these students, are they current or they're not specific people?
Yes, thank you, ครับอาจารย์ Arati. For the NXCT, it doesn't they focus on the migrant learning center. So they they are mostly Korean, but there are some Burmese and also some ethnic minority from Myanmar, and during this discussion, the group discussion, they said that okay, they take the migrant center learning center as a the focus, not the ethnicity, because they have treated the same way, like and they have been affected, as a whole group, because yeah, they are in the same learning center, in the same situation, something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Because at the border, they have also Korean education school, right? And then, yeah, students have not mentioned it. So I wonder, are you going to put this school into the context or not? Because it's very important, especially for refugee or migrant who still in the refugee camp. They rely on those education too.
I would like to add some. They are not focused on the current learning center in the refugee camps. They focus on the one that outside the camps. Thank you.
I wonder whether our students understand the difference between literature review and the report writing. The way our student has described, I guess he is trying to describe, he is trying to tell us kind of the migrant education during COVID-19. But I think when we talk about literature review, we would like the student to perhaps identify some of the gaps or some of the issue that has been already done. In other words, if they take, let's say, 5 or 8 papers on migrant education, what are the main issues found in these studies or these papers, and what is needed, what has not been done? For example, is there any study done on education achievement among the children who go to the migrant school, for example? How about the issue of language? Do they teach Thai language or they do teach Korean language? What is the education? What is the language policy in those migrant education school, for example? In other words, literature review should help us or help the student to understand the existing knowledge based on some previous studies and identify some of the gaps for him or for her to formulate research question and try to answer it later.
Thank you, ครับ อาจารย์ Chayan ครับ This is I think this is a big issue for them, and I will collect it, your comments, and also from others to tell them to make them work on to work them on this and make it more specific and get on the right way to get the understanding of the from the existing literature. Thank you ครับอาจารย์ครับ
Thank you. So now we will move to the group 3, number 3, local knowledge and local economy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm from group local knowledge and local economy. So in our literature review, we follow by our question, research question for about how they apply local knowledge in Ban Hue Ikang, how they apply the local knowledge to sustain the local economy in their village, and also with the also how did Korean before express part and how they adjust their livelihood current in the COVID-19 pandemic. So we study in the four article about the reconstruction of post-COVID-19 agriculture, and from biomedical to political economic crisis food system of COVID-19. Also, and about this food crisis is different. And the last one is a week in the life of COVID-19 in Ottawa, Canada. So we will show how we apply in our research question.
So hello, I'm Nicholas, and I'll explain what is agroecology and perhaps the future of agriculture after COVID-19. So prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, there were already existing issues which were caused by corporate capitalist agriculture. The issues can range from the loss of biodiversity, the destruction of stable ecosystems, or the lack of nutritional diversity for most of people. Once the pandemic hit, the problems were exacerbated and people actually started to become more aware about these problems. It is somewhat of a paradox that people have capitalized agriculture and developed technologies to improve livelihoods and feed a larger number of people, but these so-called improvements have also been the catalyst for environmental degradation, the growing insignificance of local small-scale farmers, inequality, and imbalanced diets. Corporate large-scale agriculture can also be the host for the spread of epidemics. So as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic, people opt to buy highly processed foods that can actually be stored for longer periods of time because of the lockdown measures. As a result, the demand for fresh crops and fruits stagnate, which thus declines the income of small-scale farmers who actually depend on the consumption of local markets. In some cases, industrial meat production sites have actually proved to be hotbeds for spreading the COVID-19 virus. So what agroecology aims to change is they want to change agriculture to focus on the importance of small-scale farmers who can actually provide for their communities with fresh, healthy, and diverse variety of crops. The system can be useful in preventing food shortages due to supply chain disruptions in periods of epidemics such as the one we have now, outbreaks, and climate fluctuations. The ways in which they can implement this is by reducing the use of pesticides, an alternative livestock production system called the silvopastoral system, which creates complex habitats supporting diverse animals and plants. Once they implement the silvopastoral system, there will be trees and palms, which can provide the farmers with marketable goods, which and also food for humans and livestock. And these this complex habitat can indirectly maintain and improve soil fertility. By implementing this change towards agroecology, it can ensure the availability and the affordability of fresh and diverse variety of foods. Urban dwellers actually need to know that what they buy, what they consume is a political and has a political and an ecological impact. So once they switch to purchasing local products instead of those of corporate food chains, the change can actually bring about socio-ecological sustainability. So how agroecology correlates with the study we will conduct in Hawaii village is because our groups wants to know how the community sustain themselves in terms of food. Is shifting cultivation the only method they use? Are there agricultural methods ecologically sustainable? As a result of the pandemic, has the community been affected negatively due to lockdown measures and the low demand of fresh crops, fresh vegetable crops and fruits? Do the villagers have plans to change, or do they continue their current methods of conducting agriculture? And do they wish to continue the same relationships they have with the local economy once the pandemic dies out?
So the emergence and spread of COVID-19 have created unexpected political and economic crisis. COVID-19 has been revealed to be the weakness in the capitalist economy. In particular, it affects production, processing, distribution, and food consumption. So this leads to a crisis of starvation and biomedical uncertainty. So food system worldwide may worsen further, which is why this is related to food chains, food system, and agricultural production. So there are three main key points about the food system in times of COVID-19. The first one is the level of nations. So during COVID-19, the giant food processing industry like Unilever is faced with the declining shareholds, and it also affects the poor and the wealthy country in which most of the store markets or the food industry are shutting down. The second one is the level of food chains. The food system contains the transition from primary production to the final consumption. It requires the infrastructure to produce the food packagings, in which the infrastructure consists of the companies that deliver the necessary inputs, the other resources to the farm, and transport the company, distribute them to the local market, supermarket, fresh market, and finally to the consumer. The third one is the specificity of food and food chains. So, for example, in China, in the farm are continue open as well as the food industry, except for the slaughterhouses, and also the transportation system are still working on. However, the food system is still in a crisis as well as other industry and service sectors. So this is due to the dominance and consumption that are integrated into the food empires. But in the food sector, there's a specific problem, which is the lower demand. So Huaygang village that our group will go, the Huaygang village is the primary production because they plant and grow their own crops, especially crop rotation. And before the pandemic, I think the village is the one who sends all of the products to the factories and processes food industry. So during the pandemic, the factory couldn't get the villagers' product due to the transportation system and lockdown sessions. So these problems are directly affect the food chains because there are no more supplies for the consumer. And also when the villagers cannot export their products, there will be a lot of surplus and spoiled products. So according to the research, questions like how the village member cooperate to maintain and stabilize their food security system. So this article, I think it maybe support by regarding the solution for the solution for the villager to prevent the surplus or spoiled crops. Like it has mentioned some points about the primary products, which the villager can create their own internal resources as much as possible while minimizing their external resources. Thank you.
Yes. Also, in the another article is the food crisis is different from the past of food crisis in our history. So, in the food crisis during COVID-19, food crisis in this time in COVID-19, we will see the food access and food system is linked to the global economic, and so also the food supply is disturbed by lockdown and lateness among the worker. You will see the how lockdown to affect in the food supply, the supply chain to the movement of food that have been disturbed from the lockdown policy, and also the supporting production support for the worker by the employer. They don't have the much for protect all of the worker, and they made the worker have the like this. And even the food price effect in the from the complex factor. So in the issue, we will talk about the food crisis by human economic system, but the lack in immunity and supply network at the food session. So in our group, we study how to people in Hue Ikang village apply the local knowledge to sustainable and experience from the past. So this article will give us to how impact of the food system in crisis, more than the accession in the helping policy to fix a problem about the hunger or employment. Are also good at managing local knowledge to handle situation in this crisis.
So okay, so the last topic is a bit in light of COVID-19 in Ottawa, Canada. This topic is talking about how COVID has spread into Canada and how the government have been deal with it. So here is my conclusion. First, I would like to talk about how COVID-19 has spread into Canada. For is traveling, and second is international student. The third is foreign worker, and the last one is movement of commodity. And how did they deal with it, and how the government have been deal with it is they all shut down all the restaurant and entertainment sport, and also shut down all school, no public transportation, social distancing, and food restriction and requirement to wear a mask. Since they have been to be in lockdown for like a couple weeks or a month, so that means they must have some of kind of rule like food of restriction, because otherwise they're gonna buy all of it and there's no left for the other people. And how this article will help our project. This article is about the issue of COVID-19 and how it has been dealt with. So at this point, we can use the information to compare about how COVID has been dealt with between Canada and Hue Ikang. I'm not talking about just Hue Ikang, but I'm also talking about the COVID situation in Thailand also. As you can see right now, the COVID situation in Canada is much better than Thailand right now. So I think we can use this information to apply to help the COVID situation in Thailand also, and in Hue Ikang also, to get everything much better right now. Thank you.
This end of our presentation. Any mentor?
Thank you so much. So any comments or questions?
Any paper that deals with food security during the COVID-19 pandemic.
sorry, in this paper, this food crisis, and in this issue, there is also know about they talk about the food security in the also at the macroeconomic, like in the big picture. But I think this paper can guideline us in our research question to know how they use the food security in this Hoi Ikang village.
That people also use the local knowledge to respond to the food crisis. That's why you want to apply for that into Thailand. I'm not sure.
In paper in Canada,
right?
Also.
Yeah. My point is, it's that the paper, right? The Ottawa, the Canada, someone already done it. My point is, the local people also apply for the local knowledge to respond to food crisis during the COVID-19, and you use this kind of a model to apply in the Thai context. Am I right? No, not really.
The person who did the week in the life of COVID-19 in Ottawa, Canada, what she wanted to do is she wanted to compare how people in the village we want to conduct the field research, how they dealt with COVID, and she wants to compare it with how they dealt with it in Ottawa in Canada. It's a bit like of a far comparison, but might have something in common.
That.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we do. But it's not the one about in Canada is not about food security.
Okay. So if there are no any other comments, thank you very much. And we will continue to the group 4, migrant workers. Please.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So our topic is COVID-19 and migrant workers, focusing on the vulnerability and coping strategies of migrant sex workers. So the introduction is the COVID-19. It has a huge effect on the economic crisis and human security, but they also review the gaps that further the vulnerable people. And sex workers, they are the vulnerable people that has been marginalized for all the long time, yet they were excluded from the amelioration, including health services and economic support from the government or the state. And it's even harder for the sex workers who are migrants to cope with the crisis because they tend to have more vulnerability factors. So here is our 2 main topic question. The first one is, what are migrant sex workers' vulnerability factors caused by COVID-19? And we will be focusing on the concept of vulnerability later. And the second one is what coping strategies they use to develop their livelihood in order to survive during COVID-19. So let's get started with the vulnerability. So vulnerability can be defined as the diminished capacity of individuals or group to anticipate, or cope with, or resist and recover from the impact of any crisis. So the context of the vulnerability, it is the levels of facing risk or disaster, high pressure, and the food security. It was influenced by 3 main factors, which are trends, or shocks, or seasonality. For trends, it could be the trends of population or resources management. The shock could be like the disease or the disaster or economic recession. And for seasonality, it is like the net of product and the changes of the price range due to the change of the season and also the employment rate. But for COVID-19, it can be considered as the shocks that hit the world community and has a huge effect on the context of vulnerability. And the vulnerability, it also has a huge effect and impacts on the coping strategy and livelihood of individual. So here we're going to talk about the vulnerability of being a migrant sex worker. Well, we have to understand that being a sex worker, there's already has a primary risk or vulnerability that they have to face, which are sexually transmitted infections, and also the financial insecurity. But what it worse for being a migrant sex worker is that they don't have the social security, including like social status and the limited of civil. And they also lacking the right as a state citizen. They don't have the necessary papers like work permit or like national identity or proof of residence to be fit in the eligibility criteria for social support. So here are some cases that I have picked up. It is about the HIV and sex workers. So we can see that there will be some similarity between HIV and COVID-19. So let's take a look. So for HIV, despite the global expansion of access to care and treatment, the sex workers with HIV still continues to face many barriers to access to the services, and they have poor treatment outcomes also. The context of the sex worker heightened risk for HIV is characterized by various social and structural constraints, and the sex worker is like still be criminalized in many countries. Therefore, they were excluded from the national responses. Here we found that there's still like the similarity between HIV and COVID-19, even though time passed by like very long. So the similarity, the occupation is still illegal and still be criminalized. Therefore, it's made them being excluded from the state support scheme. But there are also something that is different. For HIV, the disease can be prevented by using condoms and still available to have some physical touch. But for COVID-19, of course, it cannot be prevented by just using condoms. And of course, the physical touch is not safe to have. And the severity of health insecurity and financial insecurity is increased because when they are not allowed to have physical touch, due to their occupation, they require the physical touch. That means their income has been decreased during the COVID-19 and maybe more severe than the time during HIV. And here are some COVID-19 study cases which can show you the vulnerability that the sex worker needs to face. So the sex worker venues have been shut down, and due to the economic crisis, they cannot afford the rental payments. So the demand for shelter and supporting houses has been increased. And not only with the habitat problem that they also have some mental illness, mental health problem that caused by the anxiety over their income, their food security, and their housing. And they also have some anxiety of like getting infected from continuing to work in the absence of social protection. And another cases that I found is like the sex worker who is pregnant or has just given birth during the COVID-19. The nursing mother, they lack the care and the resources to like cater for their needs as well as their infants. And they don't have the enough financial support to raise their children, and they still like face the risk of getting infected and can be deliver the disease to their children also. So here is a coping strategy and livelihood. So the vulnerabilities have influenced the coping strategy of sex worker. And the coping strategy here, it requires livelihood assets and support from policy and institutions. Here is an overview of a sustainable livelihood framework that can explain about the research that we are going to do. Can be like some theoretical methods. So you can see that there the vulnerability context that can affect the livelihood asset and also the policy institutions processes. And it so does affect the livelihood outcome. And in the same time, the livelihood outcome can affect the livelihood assets as well. If you have more income or you can gain more like power or you're better in negotiation, you tend to have more livelihood assets to make your livelihood outcomes become better. So it's like just like the circle, it's like affects each other. So the livelihood assets, it has 5 of them. The first one is human capitals, including individual skills, ability, the health condition. And this one is the most important and it has a huge influence on other assets as well. And the second is the natural capital, like natural resources, both public resources and personal resources. The second is the financial capital, including the income, the asset, and the money capitals. The fourth one is the physical capital, which is the infrastructures like transportation, water supply, or energy. This must be provided by the government. And for social capitals, it's including connections, relations, cooperations, and social movements. So it tends to involve more about the community and individual relationship. So the conclusion is the accessibility and ways they use this asset can affect the livelihood strategy and define the livelihood outcomes of individuals. These are some examples. So the sex worker has raised their cooperations among them, build up a community to provide financial support, address social and structural barriers to their health and human rights. So they have seek some allies from both government and non-government organizations in order to achieve the social and policy change and expand access to quality in HIV services. This is an example from the HIV transmitted time, which can show you that they have a very well social assets, which is like the very strong community and the cooperations that develop their livelihood. And this is the polity and institutional support. Well, it is a very important factors, but unluckily for the sex worker and for the migrant sex worker, it's impossible to get the support from the laws and have legal rights like other occupations. But however, they can buy themselves a health insurance and gain access to public health service, including HIV treatment, but that costs them the more capital, the more money that they need to spend, and someone cannot afford it. So some example cases, a case from Myanmar. A sex worker in Myanmar said there's no government support specifically targeting sex worker, and there is support for the general public, but not for the sex worker. And there's nothing that they can ask for from the government, and they are not allowed to do that also. Yes, and that is all the literature review that I've been working on these few days, and here's some reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanakan. So any question or comments?
Tiny. That's just Remy. I read a paper. I think I published last year. It's 2 years ago. It's about the migrant worker, Bangladesh migrant worker in Singapore. And after the Singapore government securitized the issue because they create some social riot. And this is also discussed about something like coping strategy and resistance. I can send it to you. I think it might help you. Maybe this is not sexual worker, but I think migrant worker maybe has similarity. I can send you that paper is very interesting. And also talking about body politics. I think, okay, I'll send it to you.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, so in my opinion, okay, opinion. Okay, in my opinion, I think the livelihood access that you use is very interesting. The combined with the different types of capitals, and this is, I think, very the main point that you have to explore and also gives the details that I don't know what kind of methodology have you planned, but we can talk later about this. And I think if you can give the concrete example of what the sex worker, they use the capitals to, or their fight, or their use any strategies to deal with this is very interesting. Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Ajahn, for yeah, actually, yeah, we know that we need to review more literature, but because of the time limited, so even the gap, we could not identify the gap yet. So we need a little bit more time to read and explore on that, and then we can put case study to explain how sex worker employ those access or like social capital or other capital, right? Or even how they negotiate to get institutional support, and how develop those type of access into strategy. Yeah. And one more thing, I just realized that we might need to consider about cultural aspect like stigma, because as a migrant, there are stigma, right? As a sex worker, there's stigma, and also many political aspects that we might need to look at it, like lockdown policy or some kind of the state policy that close the restaurant, for example. So they could not find any additional job or additional income to support why they could not, work as regular. So that also another problem is that we might need to explore more on that.
I think the review of the literature should point out whether there is some existing literature on social capital done among sex workers during COVID-19. If there is no study done on this issue, then the review of the literature should point out that here there is an absence of such effort to look into this issue. And maybe this is a good, this can be a justification for the students' paper to focus upon what is missing.
Thank you so much.
Chanakan, I wonder that for your research, you only documentary research or you want to have a field work too? And I think that we have only 2 months for this research. And if you want to go to the field work or you want to interview some sex workers, do you have any previous contact with them? Because sex workers, it's not easy to access to them. It's not the same as Hue Ikang community. Yeah.
Yes, I and my mentor have discussed about this before. So we choose to gain some, cooperations with the Empower. It's Mulanity Empower. So there are some migrant sex worker working there, and I think we can gain some information and interview from the sex worker in their, in their caring. And we expected to have a field work as well. I think we can access more information from the interviewee.
Thank you. So now we come to the last group, state power and policy, please.
Share my screen. Can you hear me clearly and see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so hi, I'm Elisa. I'll be presenting the literature review on behalf of the State Power team. So let me quickly go through what we will discuss. We have 3 core concepts here that we've been reading and building our knowledge on. The first is securitization, and then we have social conflict concept, politics of scale. I will define and explain each of these. And then lastly, I'll talk about our contribution, how we will try to fill the research gap that we've noticed. So first we have securitization. A lot of you have probably heard of this before. It's very mainstream and popularized by the Copenhagen School. It's the process of turning a normal issue into a security issue. So let me show you how it's done for anyone unfamiliar. First, you have the securitizing actor. This is usually politicians, but it can also be civilians, NGOs, or whatnot. The securitizing actor tries to make the normal issue become the security issue towards the target audience. The target audience can be pretty much anyone. It could be civilians or it could be the government as well, but generally it is civilians. And the traditional securitization process says that a successful securitization is based on whether the target audience accepts or does not accept. If the target audience does not accept, it only becomes a securitization move. Whereas if the target audience accepts, it becomes a successful securitization. This is a very important point because we will be contesting this and arguing against this later in our contributions. So back to securitization. This is a theory that has been highly criticized for being from a Western perspective and for not being really applicable to Asia or non-Western or non-democratic countries. For one, a lot of countries do not have a democratic system. And the extraordinary measures here, if the target audience accepts the successful securitization, it allows the securitizing actor to take extraordinary measures. These measures do not follow a democratic process. But if you are not in a democratic country, then there's no democratic process to bypass. So this is a strong criticism. And also, Asian states or non-Western states are more likely to be fragmented or have a different securitization process that is not included. So this is the theory by Yud, who gave this, and Curley and Harrington gave the criticisms that we read. And then next up, we have the social conflict concept. Both of the illustrations that I'm showing you are inspired by or given by Ajahn David. So this next concept is the social conflict concept. If you look on the left, you'll see a United State entity. This might be how a lot of people view a state as one whole with united goals. But the way we will view it and view the power struggle in Thailand related is we will view Thailand as a fragmented state. So each of these different shapes represent a different social force or social group, such as ethnic groups, religious groups, or social class divides. And each of these groups, if you look on the right here, they all have different goals, ideologies, and these contrast and contest each other, which is very important to our theory. So if you look more into it, this social conflict concept, as said by Jones and Hamari, is that it's a critical political economy approach based from Australia in Murdoch University. If you've ever seen a policy by government and you've wondered, like, why did they choose that one? They could have chosen this better one. This approach attempts to explain the policies through using social and political factors to explain it. So Jones argued that states' response to security issues should be analyzed through multiple societal factors and groups within the state, and we should view any security policy as an outcome of power struggles between forces. We agree with Jones in this case, and we will be applying it. This basically says that the state is fragmented and not a united unit, and the policies that come out are a result of the conflicts. And whatever policies come out do not affect all citizens or all social classes equally. This leads to class divides and prioritization of some groups' interests over others. Some people are marginalized, and this creates policies that are unfair, no matter what. So the last concept I will be talking about is politics of scale. So if you look in the bottom right corner, these are the scales that are relevant to our research. We have the international scale, which is global, regional scale, which for us would be ASEAN, national scale is Thailand, and local scale as Chiang Mai. So if you look during a power struggle, the opponents will have opposing ideal scales that they will want to address the issue for the way that's most beneficial to them. So if you look at the Thai protests, which we'll be analyzing, the Thai protests and Thai government, the Thai government would want to keep things at a national or a local scale because that's where they have the power benefit. Whereas the protesters try to scale jump. Scale jump is shifting political contestation to a different scale to bring in new actors and resources according to Hamari and Jones. So if the protesters can successfully move it to the international scale, they can get more support from NGOs, the UN and whatnot to equalize the power imbalance. And then simply put, to rescale is to redistribute the power and the scope of political institutions and actors and power dynamics in state power. So it's relocating the power within the state to address issues. So these are the three main concepts. I will just read this out very quickly so that just to refresh, securitization is the act of turning a normal issue into a security issue, which demands resources and attention. In the social conflict theory, we will view the state as fragmented instead of one unit and use it to analyze policies given during the securitization of COVID-19. And politics of scale is the level at which a political issue should be addressed. Might be national, international, otherwise. So lastly, on to our contributions and our theories. Our first theory is arguing against the fact that a successful securitization is dependent on target audience acceptance. We don't agree with that, or we will be exploring that more, because we found that the success of a securitization, especially in a non-democratic country, is more dependent on who wins in the battle of the power struggle, not on the acceptance. The audience might not acceptance, but the securitization can still be successful without the audience acceptance. And our second theory is that the roles of securitizing actors and audience are not fixed. once again, going back to the protests and our empirical focus on the protesters and Thai government during the context of COVID-19. The Thai protesters were securitizing issues within Thai government of lack of transparency, while also being the audience for Thai government securitizing COVID-19. So vice versa, the Thai government became the securitizing actor for COVID-19, as well as the audience for governmental issues, Thai governmental issues. So these are our two theories. Here are 5 out of the 6 papers we've read and our team members. Thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. So any questions or comments?
I wonder whether you have come across any literature on the relationship between security and also the economic how would you call it, economic situation. In other words, when the state put more emphasis upon security, like for example, lockdown policy, then the people who are suffer is not only they don't have freedom of traveling, but those who are involved in tourist industry with lost income. Is there any literature on that?
So for that, we haven't found much literature on Thailand yet, since the situation is still new, but we've been analyzing the H5N1 outbreak in Indonesia and how it unfairly affected backyard poultry farmers rather than the conglomerates to preserve the economy and the political interests in the poultry industry. So we have been exploring it, but we haven't found the data for Thailand yet.
Maybe you should point out that there's a lack of literature pertaining to that area. So, which is, I think, the gathering from gray literature, most complaints from local people, as well as from those who are involved in business sector. They are complaining about the unbalanced policy of the state during COVID pandemic.
Thank you for your feedback.
Any comments? Can I ask one question? So
Please.
in the securitization theory, does it need to be only government or the power people who have to deal with this? Can it be just like normal people who have less power use this securitization as the strategies to overcome or to fight under this situation?
Yes, definitely. Normal people or everyday civilians can also be securitizing actors, especially if they act within a group like the Thai protesters did. They're a good example of civilians acting as securitizing actors.
Yeah, because I also observed that many people during the conflict, the political conflict, people use or claim on the security issues for their livelihood, for their like protests or something.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a very good point. Thank you.
Okay, so if no more comments, thank you very much for the
Thank
last
you.
group. So now we come. Okay, so we will have 10 minutes break for refresh our body and mind. Okay, so come back at 11:37. 10 minutes. Okay.
Okay, we'll come back. So in the second section, that will be me, Ajahn David, and Ajahn Ploy. We will give introduction to literature review, and that will be my responsibility. And the second part will be research design and a short, brief introduction about the methodology will be charged by Ajahn Ploy. Okay, can you see the share screen? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So I divided my topic into the three sections. I will briefly introduce what literature review is. That will be the first section, and followed by how to prepare to do the literature review. And the final one is according to my teaching experience and also my research experience, I would like to share the difficulty and will give some tips for you to do literature review in the future for these projects. Okay. And these are the references that I use. There's two papers that I give as examples in today's lecture. Okay, you can go download from our CMU library website. Okay. Okay, so basically, at the beginning, that's you can see the slide here. This is how we do the research. That we can divide into different sections, but it depends on the research type of a research paper. But basically, normally this is how we do our research in a journal paper or master thesis and PhD thesis. And we have the introduction that usually that we problematize the issue in theory or empirical parts. And later that we will have the research questions, and so we will have our main argument. Okay. And the third part will be the most important one. And also, I think, even including me, now feels so difficult, is the literature review. And then will be the methodology and analysis section and the final conclusion and reference. Okay, basically we will have at least like 5 or 6, but I mean, it depends on the author, how you organize your research paper. Okay, but literature review, in my opinion, is the most difficult one. And okay, so if you Google, you type literature review, this term, I think it's not so difficult. It is so many information to teach you, and also YouTube teach you how to do the literature review. So I just give the list for some of the website at the university that explain teaching the student how to do the literature review. Okay, so say for example, the one university said the literature review is a comprehensive summary of previous research on the topic that you want to do your research. So, and then you can see here, comprehensive summary. So summary basically is the most important one. Sorry, that's the foundation of the literature review. But also you need to add your own opinion and your perspective, link to your research question and reflect to your research contribution. Okay. So what is the literature review for the reader? Okay, when I read the journal article, when I read book, when I read report, literature review side actually section can help me to guide the particular subject area, okay, or what is current in the field. For example, that I think one of our team using the push and pull, that's kind of a translationalism, but push and pull, there's a theory has been developed since the Second World War, even until right now. So not always has the same argument, the same scholar involved in this theory. So if I read a paper, I will know how this theory developed from the Second World War until maybe in the Cold War period, after the Cold War period, and until right now, even the COVID-19. So if I ask the reader, when I read the literature review, I will say, oh, how does this push and pull theory develop? How about for the author? When we do the literature review, we need to show we have read the similar previous study on your topic and evaluate it and assimilate the work to your topic. Okay, you need to show the reader that you understand this issue or the theory very well. Okay, that's why the second point for the author, you can see what you do in the literature review is demonstrate your familiarity with the topic and to contribute to the academic debate. So say, for example, I think we will have some Myanmar student, and with Chiang Mai University has very good Myanmar study. If you see the photo here, there's the three scholars here that they study the Myanmar politics. The Myanmar politics, one of the famous scholars is John Land. Okay, he studied Myanmar politics, very famous. So if you want to do the Myanmar politics, even including right now the coup in Myanmar, if you don't cite his work, you study the Myanmar coup, I will feel that, oh, you don't really understand this issue because there's something missing in your literature review. And actually, South is very famous in studying the ethnic state in Myanmar as well. If you study the current Kachin and you don't cite his work, I will feel, oh, I think you did not interview him and you don't do field work and you don't cite his, you don't read his work. I will feel that that's also, again, something missing in your literature review. And Ian Halliday is the one to study the Myanmar politics, especially the relation between China and Myanmar. Again, you should broaden your horizon and read more papers related to the topic that you want to study. Okay. So what do you need to do in a literature review? Okay, I give some suggestion. This is how I do it when I do in my paper, and also suggest a guideline for my students. You can consider to taking this as taking this as your guideline in the future when you do the final paper and even do a master thesis. So I create this. I call it SSI principle. Okay, SSI principle is the first thing is you need to recap the previous study. Do you know the meaning of the recap? Yeah, summary. Okay, summaries. Okay, you need to use your own wording to summarize the previous work. But that is very difficult. The very difficult is for several reasons because first is we are not native speaker. Sometimes when many of my students, they struggle to read the English paper. And read language is the barrier. And there's a huge, many academic jargon, like body politics, transnationalism, capitalism. I don't know what's that. And then when the scholar discuss those issues, they combine, like they put them all together. So I understand each vocabulary, but I don't understand the whole sentence. Okay, so sometimes we can see this situation when we're doing the literature review. Okay, so a summary. Okay, try your best to summarize, and I will give the tip in the future. How would you cope with this situation? The summary is a short statement of the idea. Are you able to summarize the previous work or a journal paper within one sentence? Okay, you need to train yourself. Okay, then the second one is you need to reorganize, reshuffle the information. This is how you show you have the capacity to do the literature review. This is what we call synthesize. Okay, to mixing different ideas. I will encourage the student to comprehensively discuss the previous work rather than discuss previous work by one book or journal article. So if you have a capacity, you can comprehensively discuss them. Actually, you can show in your knowledge is I'm better than other students because I am able to discuss the previous work comprehensively. But that is a very, very difficult part. Okay, and then the final part is also very difficult because I struggle to read the English paper. I don't understand what the author's argument. And now I need to show my opinion on the theory. So the final part is you need to point out the research gap in this study, in the study that you bring in your literature review section. Identify, okay, SSI, recognize a problem, the weakness or the gap in the previous work. And this is how you can show your research to contribute to fill the research gap in your research paper. Okay, that's why I think in the future, we have Ajahn here. Usually when we're doing the PhD and MS thesis examination, the examiner will ask you, what is your research contribution? Okay, that is somehow reflect to how you write, how you work on your literature review. Okay, so you may ask me a few questions that I kind of predict the question that you may feel that you want to ask me. Okay, so how much literature review do I need? 10 papers, 1 papers, 5 papers, 20 papers. Okay, in my opinion, it depends on the type of your research paper. Okay, so say for example, the one Cho In Land, the one that the scholar based in Myanmar. Okay, he published the paper in a high quality of the journal, Contemporary Southeast Asia. And this is a very, very interesting paper to discuss. He criticized Aung San Suu Kyi and back to the 2007. Okay, that's pretty much long time ago. And during the time that Aung San Suu Kyi enjoyed, the international reputation. But in his paper, he kind of using these 2 books to criticize how we understand Aung San Suu Kyi based on the Western angle. Okay, so in his paper, this is the literature review paper. He only discussed 2 books. He only discussed 2 books. Okay, but that can be counted as, and he published the paper. And this is a very interesting paper. I would suggest you to read it if you're interested in the Myanmar politics. And then the second one is I also provide this paper to my BA student. Okay, it's a terrorism in Southeast Asia. In this paper, I only list 4 books here, but this is also the literature review papers and written by Natasha Hamilton Hart. And she actually discussed over 10 books, 10 literature, including books and journal article. And this is a very, very interesting paper to show how we understand the terrorism in Southeast Asia, again, by applying the Western concept. Okay, and we criminalize those the Muslim. Okay, during the time that the United States invaded Iraq around the mid-2000. Okay, so back to the question, how much literature do I need? You can also only review 1. Maybe you know some journal, they publish book review. The book review, like they only review 1 book. So it depends on you. Okay, if you think that 2 or 3 will be enough, that you can concentrate on 2 or 3 books. And if you think that there's just many scholars engage in this issue, you can broaden your choice. There's no problem. Okay, it depends on the author. But at the BA level or at our projects, I would suggest like 5 or 6 at least. Okay. So what type of literature am I conducting? So you will see that some literature, the paper they discuss NGO report. Okay, I read that paper that some of the scholars, they criticize NGO report. It depends on whether your research type. Some research papers is like more radical, and some are more empirical, and some will be like policy suggestion. It's depend on you, and then you can decide what literature you want to include in your literature review section. Okay, and what is the scope of my literature review? There's so many things. For example, journal articles, books, and government documents, even popular media. Okay, you can also include in them. Okay, you can also mix them together. That's no problem. Then how do I select the text relevant to your topic? I think that will be the one issue that Ajahn Chayan also raised the issue. We say, for example, I give that example here. If I want to study the relation between the deorientation and corruption in Myanmar, if I found a paper discussing a similar topic, but in Cambodia, do I need to include in that? But different context. I think you can. Okay, so my suggestion is you can broaden your option first, and later you read them first, and later you can see that, oh, is it the papers or the books relevant to your research or not? And you decide whether you want to include that's the papers or book in your literature review sections. Okay, so these are the 4 questions. And the main important thing is you are the author. Okay, and you have the right to decide what journal article and the books you want to include in your literature review section. But just remember, don't ignore the big scholars when they're doing the similar topics or the very famous papers. Okay. And the difficult and tips, I list a few difficulty here, and I'll give the tip for you in the future when you do the literature review. The first is, as I mentioned before, the academic jargons. Okay, that's very difficult, even including me. In my team, we studied securitization, but I have to admit, I studied securitization when I studied master. I did not understand this theory until I studied PhD. So if you don't understand this theory, it doesn't matter, but I still you try, right? My main point here is knowledge is accumulated. If you don't understand right now at the moment, it doesn't mean you will not understand next year at the moment. Okay, so, but you need to try your best to understand and know why you don't understand the theory. Is which part, for example, the securitization, I don't really understand why the government need to use the extraordinary measure. Okay, the tips for this is develop your reading habit. Okay, you need to develop your reading habits. The more reading can help you broaden and deepen your understanding of the issue that you want to study and the theory. And also you need to do the reflection. I think that I always suggest a student to do these, but for me, this is my habit. After I finish reading one paper, I usually make my own reflection and I summarize by myself. Okay, I summarize the paper within like 500 words and put my own reflection, whether I agree or disagree, no matter what kind of a weakness in the paper. Methodologies, the main argument, the author understanding of the theory. Okay, so if you can summarize by yourself and also put the reflection and can help you to memorize the papers, the author, because in the future, you will read, especially when you in the future, if you're going to pursue your master degree, you will read hundreds of papers. My PhD reference, I have 500 reference and 300 journal article and books. Okay, so you trust me, you will not remember all the papers, main argument. Okay, you read it today, after 1 week you forget. Okay, so doing the reflection, develop your habits will be very, very helpful. Trust me. You can start right now. You're only the second year or the first year or the third year. Starting right now will be very benefit. I hope in the future, if you study the master, you have this habit, you will send an email to me. Ajahn David, thank you so much. You developed my habit. Okay, so this is the first tips that I want to recommend you to do. Okay, so reading is the basis of a successful literature review. Okay, you need to read. No reading, no literature review. No reading, no literature review. Okay, so I spend a lot of time on reading. Okay, so the second part, second difficulty is writing. Okay, according to my experience, when I teach one of the subject in our department is a world of social science and help the student to do the literature review, I found that there should be no problem for the student to summarize if they have the good English ability. There's no problem for them to understand the paper. To be honest, in my group, the paper that I provide is the paper I provide for the PhD and the MA student. And they understand the paper. Okay, so in my opinion, if a student who has a good English ability and at least you can communicate and to know how to grab the author's idea, it's no problem for you to summarize. Maybe the word you use may not so accurate, but I think it doesn't matter. I think you grab the main idea from the paper. The issue is you are unable to discuss them comprehensively. Because maybe there's some gap in the knowledge that you understand the issue. Okay, so I created one question here. You can, after you do the literature review, you can ask yourself, have I critically analyzed the literature I use, including their strengths and weakness? Oh, Ajahn David has done a hydropower dam. He has a great contribution to understand hydropower dam in Cambodia. However, we cannot use this apply in the Thai context because the Thai government has a different strategy to create a hydropower dam. You know, you consider the strengths and weakness. Okay, so that will be the very good part in the literature review. You're not only criticizing, you also praise this scholar. Okay, it has a great contribution. However, in the Southeast Thailand context, the situation is very different. Okay, securitization also the one that my team already explained, that securitization is the one to apply in the Western context. But many scholars, when they analyze the avian H5N1 in Indonesia, they found out it's difficult to apply this concept, a theory in Southeast Asia context. Final one, maybe some of us, all of us encounter this problem, also including me. I'm not the native speaker. Okay, sometimes I need to ask my wife, well, what does this mean? Why did also use this word in this sentence? Okay, so the first is English is not our mother tongue. Okay, so that's why we feel struggle, we feel frustrated to read English paper, especially the very radical papers. It's so difficult, even including me. Sometimes I need to spend 10 to 20 hours to understand the theory. So that's normal. And so Ajahn also has this problem. Okay, the student, that's very normal. So the one way is you can discuss each other. When you discuss each other, you can stimulate your thinking. And here, I would like to use the scholars, and she is from the North Europe. Okay, she wrote this book, Writing for the Scholar. And she helping those scholars whose native language is not English. How do we structure the English writing? And after 2 weeks, I will give the short workshop, small workshop to do how to do the academic writing. Okay, so the first is you can divide in your writing in the literature review in 2 parts. The first part is creative part. Okay, we put our idea into the words so they can make sense to us. I can use my own language, Thai, Chinese, French, anything. Okay, as long as you understand. Okay, what do I want to say? Okay, you can use your own language because only for yourself. Okay, that is the creative part. Then the second part is critical part. Critical part is, how should I say it? You need to remember the critical part is you write it for someone to read. It's not only you. So there's the one issue is sometimes when students submit a paper, I say, I don't really understand what you say. So that is the one issue is sometimes when we write a paper, we only, I understand, but you understand doesn't mean you don't understand. Okay, so there's the 2 parts. So the first is creative part. You write something by yourself. And the second part is how would you say that in the language can make other people to understand what you want to say? There's a one tip for here. When I studied PhD at the very beginning, that's my supervisor teach me, is you don't need to use very difficult vocabulary. You can use simple vocabulary, the simple sentence, the subject and the verb and object. And as this, someone understand and your supervisor or mentor need to understand what you say, and then they can help you to improve your understanding by, I understand what you say. I think this is not very correct. And then you will know, oh, okay, my understanding is not wrong, is wrong, and then you can improve yourself. Okay, so these are that's very short, but I think that I hope that this can help you to overcome to do the literature review. It's the most difficult part in writing a paper, doing the research, but it doesn't mean that you cannot work on this literature review. I believe that the student can overcome these. And you can take consideration to take my suggestion, the SSI principle, the summary, synthesis, and identify. And then later on, that's the final slide. Think about the language, creative part, the critical part. All right, okay, 20 minutes. Okay, thank you very much, and I will give the microphone to Ajahn Ploy.
Thank you, David. So I agree with Ajahn David that the literature review is the most difficult part in the research, but also it's the most challenging stage of the research. So Okay, so in my part, I just want to bridge from today lecture, today workshop to the next workshop, because next Tuesday we will have another workshop on the research design and methodology, and maybe this can give you some idea where to start and what should we do to do the research. So in my opinion, the research is similar to an art. So the art combine combination of the creativity and also the critical ideas that are used. And there are many different meanings that put in an art. So I think the main idea of the research design is to how you visualize your idea, how you organize in coherent or the consistent terms. So in one research combined with statement of problem, methodology, research question, literature review, and also data collection and also analysis. How will you make it into one project? So the important things that I point out here is sketch it out first before you do it. I mean, outline or draw it. Anything that comes to your mind, you start to write it or draw it. I usually use mapping to visualize my idea. So it's no need to just come with the words. You can use picture, you can use anything to deliver as natural. We human has this kind of natural process of thinking. Another thing that important is make it coherent. So research combined with many things, data from others that you read from others, that you listen from others, collect from others, and also the things that you want to say. So combine it and mix it and make it coherent. So these 2 points is very important in my opinion. And this is kind of mapping that you may be familiar already. When you as children, you use this to organize your idea. I think it's a good process that you can start to think of one thing that you're interested. For this example is the tennis. So what comes to your mind when you think of tennis? It can be principle, it can be tournaments, it can be scoring, anything that come to related to the topics. But it is not yet the things that you want to say in research. If you give this information, it's like a report. So information that you find from the topics or from the issue, but still this not show the conversation or the application that you want to say. But you can start with this. And what is research design? I got this from the link below. You can explore more. I think the whole idea of the research is really under the framework, theoretical framework, and also under the conceptual framework, and also under the paradigm. Paradigm is the most difficult word that also the normative idea and also the abstract idea, but it will, if saying the easy word is, I think it like a kind of discipline that you use. And nowadays, as the academic world already overcome with the only one discipline to study one issues, I think you can apply many paradigm or many disciplines and link it together in order to solve or in order to think of the real world problem. So here, I mean, even in social science, you deal with the issue of the social science, but you don't need to stick yourself inside the social science. You can link the science, art, other discipline that may be useful and helpful to think of the to discuss the idea. I call the knowledge production. What I mean is your research is mean you are produce some knowledge. you use other people knowledge to produce something, say something. You try to make conversation in your research. So the smallest part here is the research design, that you put your creativities and also your critical ideas inside it. So the paradigm, as I mentioned, is the model of understanding the disciplines. You can use a transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, something that can help you to find out. And the conceptual framework is the way you develop your project. So it's the whole picture. If you remember the previous slide, I showed the tennis idea, that kind of thing. How you link every part of your work under your work. What is the coherency under that? And under that is the theoretical framework. So theory or concept is important here in the research, because it will give you the way to think of the data. And that you use, like the last group explained, you have 3 theories, and also this part also including how you use those 3 theories or concepts to link to each other, or to discuss to each other, or what is the meaning of using each theory. And under that, we not only design our research, but we always come back to theory. We always go back to the conceptual framework. So during your research process, you don't need to stick with one idea and then go through it, but you can come back and forth always. And here I would like to emphasize the important ideas that most of you already mentioned. But I think to do the research or design a research is to mapping a real world problems, to create the conceptual framework, or a kind of mapping that show that how you would like to do your research. And I think the 6 things that need to be considered and keep in mind always when you do your research is, the first one is the keywords. When you read literature reviews, when you find your the previous work, you will find that those have some keywords, some topics, some issues that you want to use in your research. So keep that and then organize it, because you will find some interesting idea from those existing work. It can be argument, it can be support to your own research. And the next one is the actors. So I think in your work, you have to know who you want to study. Who is the actor? The actor here can be stakeholders, or the actors that have some actions in that problem or in that topics. So the stakeholders can be the one that get profit or disadvantage, or both sides that you consider. You can choose, because this always show that from which point of view that you will use or you will analyze your research. Or you will use the power relations to understand this. So you have superior actors or inferior actors shown in your conceptual framework. For example, if you show that the powerless people, like sex worker, vulnerable people, are the key person in your research, it will be shown in your conceptual framework that you try to understand from the eyes, from the ears of these people. And there is the actions, because the actor can be anyone that you like, the migrant worker, the sex worker, or the local people, or even the state government. And then you try to understand their relationships. What kind of roles that they play in this situation. The third one is the period of time. The period of time here, I mean, because we have the period of time, history, present, and future. So you have to know how far that you want to study. You want to go back to history. You want to use the historical ideas or historical evidence in your research. Then you have to scope it. You have to limit it. How far will you go back? Like go back to the previous century to understand the present and plan to the future. Because this is also important to show that how will you do your research. Because research is mean you search again the idea that people already study or people already talk about it, but in the new context or the new issues that you want to update, you want to further understanding for the future, for example. So know what is your time span that you will use in your research. And that will also give you the idea that how many literature reviews or how old of the literature reviews that you want to go back to. And also the data collection that you maybe need. For example, if you want to study the past, you maybe have to study from the documents because people already die. You cannot ask them anymore, for example. The fourth one is the context. So the context here actually is one of the difficult terms to understand. If you context can be mean physical setting, like location, environment, surroundings, circumstances, but it's also mean the social context, the ideological context that you can use in your research. So context here is mean the conditions that will allow you or prevent you from some actions. So if you not explain your research in context, people cannot know that in what context or in what conditions that you want to discuss about. So bring the context. It can be political context, socio-economic context, or even the location, like in the village, you know the context. The fifth one is the core ideas and supporting ideas. So here is the things that you need to go back to your research questions and see if it's already covered this kind of keywords, this kind of main idea that you want to say. Research question can be edited anytime during the research. You can come back and see. And also, you should prioritize the ideas in your research. So which is the main focus and which are other supporting ideas that you want to show in your research? Because we cannot do everything in one research in the limitation of time. So focus in one and maybe expand to the relevant ideas. So you will know the sequence, the priority, and the highlight of your own research. And the last one is the relations. Now you have keywords. You maybe draw your keywords or topics. You draw who are the actors and period of time, how far you go back to history, present, or you want to suggest some idea to the future. You have context, core ideas, supporting ideas, draw in your map. And then how will you relate those parts into one idea? How will you web it like the spider web? So the relation here is no need to be like one direction, one way. It can be two ways, cross, or the cause effect, depends how will you explain these relations. Or maybe you can find some argument from authors. For example, authors say this situation is the one-way relation, but you want to argue that it's two-way or cross interrelation, for example. So this part will give the idea of your research, overall idea of your research. And also you can draw it in like vertical or horizontal. It will also show that you consider the things in sequence, or you consider the things in which way, top down, bottom up, or you want to explain it as the circular one. So this will all show in your conceptual framework. And people always come to your conceptual framework when they try to understanding your research. The last one, I think the research methodology is also the flexible things that you can design by yourself. You can adjust, you can adapt to the situation. But the first one, the most important thing is you need to understand your own research questions. You need to clarify or define your own research questions. What I mean is, how do you think you can answer this question? You can have some kind of assumption in your mind. Because if you cannot answer this question, it's no meaning to do the research. I mean, you have some idea in your mind and you want to study, you want to prove it. That will be the concrete idea that you can start from. So you have one question. If it's too broad, if it's too narrow, if it's too abstract, cannot answer. You have to adjust with the methodology or something, but come back to your research question. Try to understand it. And then the data collections, I think it can be varieties of methodology that you can use. Data collection here is the raw data, so it's not cooked yet. It means you collect from others in numbers or in words, in any kind of idea from others. Statistic, illustration like map, table, or chart that already exists. Key informants, the person who know about this or have the story that you can learn from them. Questionnaire, do you need to, how many people you need ideas or opinions or documents from the government, from the NGO, from stakeholder, and other things that you can collect. But again, you have to know that how you're supposed to answer your question. And then you will design what kind of data that you want to collect. That will help you understand your, explain your answer. And then the way that you will collect your data, you can use many different ways. For example, for now, we cannot participate in the real situation or observe in the real situation, adjust to online or maybe the second-hand data that will be used, or the interview or the survey. So this will also show how you apply your own position as the researcher, as the person who study to access, to approach the data. And then the fourth thing is the scope of your study. So you have to have a kind of fence, so limit your research in terms that you can do it during due to the limitation of time or the data collection or your questions. Scope it, make it clear that how far you go or in which levels or scale that you want to explore, and then you will clearly see your project. And the last one, after you collect the raw data, You have to cook it. You have to analyze it, understand it. So it's not only you present what people say, you have to interpret, you have to analyze, you have to use those ideas to have conversation with the literature review, go back to your conceptual framework, and then you will come with the idea. Your own opinion, you can put it, you can use many ways to mix it. This is called data analysis. And this part will show your approach, your paradigm, your disciplines that you use, the conceptual framework, the theoretical framework, and the design that finally you will show it. And I would like to emphasize the last thing is the reflexivity. So as a researcher, you will always reflect yourself during the time of research. In each process, you have to come back to the beginning and see if it's coherent or consistently or not. And then you can adjust, decide with your own idea. And I have to say that for the research, I think a researcher is the one who have the priority or have the rights to draw or to delete or to shape it in many ways. So finally, I have to conclude that a research is like an art. So keep in mind that you can do it as you like, and also you can put your creativity, your critical, and also design it. Okay, thank you. So any questions or comments from David and my lecture?
We will upload our PowerPoint to, or share our PowerPoint. Ask Pino to send our PowerPoint to all of you, and if you are interested, you can go see the PowerPoint. Okay, so if no problems, no questions, so we finish today's workshop. Hello, everyone, are you sleeping? Or are you eating now? Okay, so don't forget, next week we will have a final mini workshop, right? The final mini workshop next Tuesday, the same, but the topic, I hope we were going to help you to move to the research design. So you should be roughly or briefly to introduce what the research you're going to do, okay, including like research questions, methodologies, something, and how you're going to analyze the theory you use, analytical framework. All right, okay, so if no problem, next Tuesday, what time? 9:30. Okay, next Tuesday, 9:30 as well. All right, I'll see you there next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.